fourth set of webinar, which we announced initially. So the theme was log the virus and unleash your spirit of learning. So we have already done 3 sets of webinar, and it was 2 at it for the lean services, and the 2 are on the lean people development. So in the last webinar we had on day before yesterday on 9th, we talked about what is the development process for people, what is the role of a coaching, and how do we really, what are the thinking which we wanted to evolve, and we had used a format called A3 thinking in that. Today we will be talking further on that, and we will take cue from our last webinar. We will talk in more detail about the people development processes. We also have today 2 of our panelists. Number 1 will be Mr. Narendra Akhori, a very prominent HR professional with over 40 years of experience. I will introduce him at the time when I invite him. And second will be my colleague and co-founder of Kognoz, Mr. Lokesh Niga. So we will be covering the today's webinar in that fashion. Let me start by sharing my screen so that you can see what is the agenda for today. Okay. So before we start, let me remind some housekeeping point. All the attendees of this webinar will be on the mute mode. So if you have any questions occurring in your mind during the webinar, please type into the Q&A box, and we will address them at the end of the webinar. You will not be able to speak unless the host decides to unmute your speaker. And please respond on the feedback of this webinar at the end of this webinar, either through any social media channel or directly writing to us or on the feedback form. Presentation will be archived at our website, and also the recording of this webinar will be available on the YouTube channel. You can search by typing Kognoz, and you will find our previous videos also, as well as the video of today's recording. Let us start with the agenda. So as I said, like in the last 9th April, we covered the human development understanding, introduction of A3 thinking and application in developing the people. Today, what we will be covering is going back to the holistic people development model of Toyota. Then we will invite Mr. Akhori for the first discussion, panel discussion. And he's a specialist in many type of coaching, but we will try to learn from him very specific thing called action learning coaching. Then we will move on to the second panelist, Lokesh, who will be talking us through the understanding the working relationship and the action coaching framework. And then I will cover up with the final word that how the action coaching framework is used in the group coaching and some case studies on that. So that is how we will be going through the today's agenda. A brief introduction about me. I think I have to repeat it because there may be few people who may not know me who have come for this webinar. So I'm basically an industry professional who has moved into the consulting, 25 years of industry experience, working in variety of executive roles, P&L responsibility across continents, across countries, and then 8 years of consulting experience, mostly the business consulting using the lean as a core of my business transformation work. I will be talking more about my deeper experience of working hands-on and managing the operations, and also what I have learned during my consulting with so many industries in manufacturing and the services and across the countries and culture. So that will be my endeavor to do the sharing today. About my company, Kognoz. Kognoz was formed about 1.5 years ago, and we are passionate about transforming people and transforming the business. We have got 4 services. Business transformation with lean as the base of our services. We do the people transformation, so organization, people, and change, the culture part. We have the third service is what we call Kognoz Talent Solutions. This is about providing the digital solutions for the talent development. So we have partnered with many companies. Major one is the Skillsoft company, and their Sum Total solution is the one which is the core for our talent management process. And finally, the Kognoz Learning Academy, who are the host of this webinar. Okay, So let us recap from the last webinar. Last webinar, I talked about that Toyota philosophy is we make people first and they build the cars. We talked about that Toyota does not miss any opportunity to develop their people, whether that is a problem solving, new product development, building any prototype, strategic deployment, kaizens, anything which comes on their way, they always try to develop their people. And when we are talking of developing the people, what is important for Toyota philosophy, and I think it is also equally important for all of us, is that people development, human development has to be more holistic. Yes, we always are passionate about identifying what we call the high potential people, hypo, and a lot of development effort goes in developing those hypos. But what we are talking here is all people have got a potential. All human resources have got something, a gift from the God, what is called, they have got a thinking brain. They can actually think and feel and really, do wonders. And they are the one who can really the most productive people. So how do we really engage and develop them has been the core of the Toyota, and that is the core of our philosophy also. So it is more about holistic development of the people. And of course, for developing the people, it requires a very good process and a very good coach, or a sensei, so we call it, or it is called in the Japanese language. So let us take a little bit more deeper look into the Toyota at this stage. Some of you might have read this book called The Toyota Way. This is the successor of the Toyota production system. So when the Toyota production system was exposed to the globe, to the world, later on in 80s, they rewrote the Toyota production system as the Toyota Way, because the Toyota production system was giving a impression that it is something which is only applicable to the production systems, while it is more about the culture. It's more about holistic culture. So they rewrote the Toyota production system rules and they defined 14 principles. Now, what is very interesting is in our research, what we have found is that 7 out of the 14 principles articulated in that book are on people development. And that was something which is and this talks about a lot about how Toyota thinks about people. So they had a principle like the very first one was base your management decision on the long-term philosophy, even at the cost of short-term financial goals. And this is something which is core of Toyota. They always talk about we have to, and when they talk about long-term philosophy, it is about really serving the society. It is all about looking into the future. And this they do by focusing on 2 things, the customers and the employees. So that is what is their core philosophy. There are very seldom in Japan, Toyota, I think, had only history of 1 strike. And after that, it was a very good mutual respect relationship between the women. Any other country like India, there are instances of strike in their Bangalore factory, once in China, probably in South Africa. So there are only few on the fingertips you can talk about, because they talk about not a philosophy of you want to cut the cost, cut the employees first. No, they don't do that. In fact, I recall one of my I was traveling to South Korea, Seoul, and in the plane I saw I was reading the newspaper, and headline was that Toyota got it wrong. And being a Toyota fan, and that is what I do, so I went into that article, and what it was talking was, it was about the small truck business in US, and that when General Motors started, Ford started, Toyota started, I think all the auto manufacturers were jumping onto the small truck business, and that strategy failed. So the newspaper was saying that there were announcements. General Motors announced that they are closing down the factory and about 14,000 people will be laid off. Ford was announcing closure of factories and 10,000 plus jobs will be gone. Toyota had a very interesting announcement. They said that we are closing these operations, 5,000 people will be impacted. They will be retrained and redeployed into the other businesses. They did not talk about laying off the people. So these are some small instances which talks about how they really respect the people. And they really care about the people because their long-term philosophy is that. They always talk about another principle was use only reliable, thoroughly tested technology that serves your people and processes. Uh, Another example is the last one, which says that become a learning organization through relentless reflection. That is called Hansei, and I covered in my last webinar also, and continuous improvement. So that reflection, that thinking is core of their principle. Another one I'll put up is that develop exceptional people and teams who follow your company philosophy. So look at grow leaders who thoroughly understand the work, live the philosophy and teach it to others. So these are the things which are there in their core. So if you look at, this is all given in the book called The Toyota Way, and also in more detail by this book called The Toyota Talent, The Toyota Way, how Toyota focuses on developing the talent. Very interesting book. And it also talks about a concept called training within industry, which I mentioned last time. And probably that will be one of the topic for our webinar in future. A very interesting concept, training within industry. And this Toyota Way pyramid, the 4 principles, 14 principles divided into the 4 sections. The philosophy, which is the long-term thinking, the process of eliminating waste, people and partners. They really talk about how do we develop the respect, how do we challenge them, and how do we grow them. And finally, the problem solving. So what is there is that about the Toyota is they really work very hard to develop exceptional people. People development is critical to Toyota. They need people with thinking capability. Now, this is something in contrast with most of the time my experience in the industry, and not only India, but even in, say, I have worked extensively in China also, Indonesia, Malaysia. People are considered, and especially when you go lower down, people are considered as hands and feet. And they are really not considered as a holistic human being. And that is something which needs to change. People development is very critical. And when you say people development, it is about their thinking. How we change their thinking so that they are more engaged. And that is something which is very important for Toyota, and so is for us. I will narrate a story about my own personal experience on doing this. That is towards the later part. The development of capable masses requires a clear plan, time, and patience. Patience is very important here because people development, it is not something which you can just do in a rapid manner. Yes, there are things like training within industry, but everything requires a little bit patience and time. So one has to do that, show that on the people development part. The people in Toyota must have the capacity and the desire to learn. This is very important. Do people have the desire to learn, or they don't want to learn? And this becomes one of their recruitment criteria also. When they get people in, this is something which they test upfront. People with general problem solving capabilities and those willing to work in the team are selected. Team working is very, very important for them. And that's why the group coaching format is what we have evolved, because people work in teams. So in a team, we should be able to coach them. The objective is to provide benefit to the employee, which in turn also returns benefit to the company. Toyota creates a situation in which there is an equal balance between the reward and the punishment. So this is the way the Toyota actually works. Now, I think enough of Toyota. I will just talk about one final story of NUMI. NUMI is New United Motor Manufacturing Industry. This is in California, Fremont, California. This was the plant which was run by Toyota for about 20-25 years, and one of the worst performing plant, a lot of strikes. That was the history of that plant. And when Toyota decided to go outside Japan first time and they partnered with General Motors, then this plant was chosen as a joint venture between General Motors and Toyota. And they started in, I think, 84. They started this plant. This plant was stopped in 1980 by General Motors. So after 4 years, this was restarted. So a lot of worker unions who were still active, people advised Toyota that don't go there. There is a militant worker union and they will not really cooperate. What happened and what was the result was a history. because the way Toyota leaders have gone about building the relationship with the American workers, building the confidence, getting the mutual trust with them, was the story. Within a couple of years, that plant became one of the best performing plant within the General Motors, and within no time, it became the best performing plant in line with other Toyota plants globally. So that talks about that how the leaders really engage people, develop people, win their trust, and actually transform the entire business. So that is what is the philosophy of Toyota. So without wasting much time, let me invite the first panelist, Mr. Narendranath Akhori today. Mr. Akhori actually requires no introduction. He is a very prominent coach right now. He's an executive coach. He's a certified ACC from the ICF, US, and he also does a lot of action coaching, which is action learning coaching. He's also a member of the Global Committee on Membership and Community of ICF. And he is a member of the ICF Global Jury Panel for selecting awards for over 180 ICF chartered chapters across the continent. More than 35 years of work experience before he hung his boot from the corporate world. But during his corporate world, he was the CHRO or Senior VP in Hero Motocorp. But before that, starting with Hindustan Unilever, Seagram, Tisco, General GE. So those are the companies where he has built his experience, and really the people there were benefited. He also was associated as a full-time professor in human resource in IMI, Delhi. So without wasting much time, let me invite Mr. Akhori. Mr. Akhori, thank you for coming today. Are you there?
Thank you, Mr. Manish, for inviting me, and good evening, all the participants.
Yeah. So, Mr. Akhori, I wanted you to share your experience that how you go about the action learning coaching, because that is something which is your hallmark, and you have made a lot of good cases in that. So, that will be my first question. Tell something about the action learning and how you do it. What is this is the WAIL, right?
Yeah. This body is known as the World Institute for Action Learning, based out of the US. They are globally present. They also have worked with Toyota Japan in launching of Lexus in Japan. So very, very interesting journey I had there. I was also the director for 2 years. As Mr. Manish talked about, this is about business problem solving. This is group coaching. It's very simple. There are only 2 rules. One is anybody can ask a question. You can talk only when there is a question on the table. The group size is normally 5 to 7 people. One of them is designated as a problem presenter, and so he asks. He comes with some urgent and important problem that is facing his company, and some of the key things are diversity, which means that if he is from manufacturing, then that group would consist of people from all disciplines like marketing, sales, HR, manufacturing. So that is vertical diversity, that senior leaders from different functions. We also encourage horizontal diversity possible, though little difficult in India because of hierarchy issue, which means that if there are, let's say, all GMs or vice president, then can we add one general manager, or can we add one senior manager? So that is called horizontal diversity. So we try to bring as much diversity as possible, because what this action learning proponent says that the more the diversity, you get better solution. If it is more heterogeneous, people, they will think, yes, group think operates, and you not get the best. And so the two simple rules I'll repeat again. Anybody can ask question. You can only make a statement if there is a question on the table. If there is no question on the table, you will keep quiet. And therefore, it's very surprising and very interesting that people are so eager to ask questions. So the whole dynamics, because normally all of you are aware that uh, between various functions in organization, let's say manufacturing, marketing, or finance, they may not, let's say they will have conflict. But in this setting, in action learning, where 5 to 7 members are there of the same company, surprisingly, everybody is keen to help the problem presenter. The problem presenter is also given an action sheet that at the end of the session, what is that you are going to do in terms of specific action. So at least 5 action points and all timelines. By when will you start? When will you complete? What is the kind of tangible benefits that company will get? So what is the dollar value of each question that is solved? So you must apply, because uh, the importance of dollar value is it has understood very clearly. That means if you attach a rupee or dollar value to any problem solving, it becomes easy to understand. So that is there. And uh, again, like Mr. Manish talked about question and learning. If you look at the word action learning, there is action and there is learning. So in the group process, typically it is 90 minutes to 120 minutes session. That's it. So it has to be very tight. And every group member is given a suggested list of leadership skill that he or she would like to practice during the session. So this list is not exhaustive. They can choose from their own. They can decide. I'll just give you an example that listening. Many leaders. I mean, I've seen in my own experience. The senior we grew, the poor listener we became, because all of us love to hear our own voices, and therefore we became poor listener. So many people choose listening. Now, as per Stephen Covey, there are further uh, division. One is simple listening. Second is attentive listening. Third is emphatic listening. That means, are you listening with feelings? Are you listening with empathy? Now, because we are not robots, as long as we are human beings, feelings and empathy will continue to be a very, very part of our communication and understanding. So, are you listening with that? Then only full interpretation happens. So that is there. Then there are other things like Mr. Manish talked about reflective inquiry. Reflective inquiry is a very important part of action learning. All of us are continuously do that. So as I was talking that one is the action which the problem presenter would try at the end of the session to present to the group what he is going to do. Then learning. In the board, what we write, each member, which particular leadership skill he will try during this 90 minutes to 120 minutes to exhibit, which means that if he's choosing listening, he will get feedback from each of the peers. How has he done on listening? So it is a very live learning where you get, as I say, online feedback, real time online feedback that, or supposing somebody has chosen to be, I want to understand. So or I want to create rapport, or I want to create a better understanding. So all this can be observed, and in real time they are given feedback. So that is broadly the action learning is all about. And I have seen it working extremely good because in my own industry, when we were struggling with real problems and not applying this in general, there will always be conflict. We'll end up with what is the next date of the meeting. But in this action learning, the people will not leave the table unless the problem presenter has come out with solid 5-point action with detailed, including the dollar value. Then only meeting it finishes. So I really liked it. I have not come across anything like it. It is phenomenal. It is purely business problem solving, which is very urgent and important. That is how action learning is all about.
This is fantastic, and in fact, for me also, this was a, really reminded me of when I don't know how many years ago I read that book, Seven Habits of Stephen Covey, and I recall that principle that first seek to understand, then to be understood. And you have very well put it there that empathy is what is missing.
Yes.
And I think, the way in the problem solving, we say that defining or understanding the problem is half the problem resolved.
Yes, absolutely.
Same is for the human behavior.
Yes.
Proper listening itself can resolve most of the issues,
Yes,
most of conflicts.
yes,
So that is very, very interesting.
Yes,
so just one additional question, like if it is not very difficult for you, can you just explain one experience, the real life experience and the kind of results you get with that, if that is possible?
The only constraint because
you don't have to name the client.
Yes, yeah, that's right. So that is what I'm bound by. So without that, it is typically medium-sized SME. The turnover is around 500 crores, and when each members write down their problems, and we also have a column that what dollar value will you get if this question is resolved. Typically on the board, there are 30 to 40 crores. Can you believe that?
Wow.
30 to 40 crores are there on the blackboard, which means that if the group is able to resolve anywhere between 5 to 7% of the turnover, they can obtain as either savings or additional sales, or whatever it is. It is so powerful, is absolutely mind-boggling. And I have seen at least in terms of actual is about 3 to 5% has happened, but in terms of promise at the meeting, it's anywhere between 5 to 7% of the annual turnover is a kind of addition which. So I have never seen, being in HR for 35 years, I have never seen any tangible results. I have never seen any dollar value because HR or training is taken as only as cost. It is not taken as benefit. But in action learning, I saw, I've experienced it in various companies that I did this, that there are dollar values.
So do you wish that you had known this technique when you were actually managing activities?
Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. So it took me 35 years or 40 years to learn this. Yes.
That is very,
It's very important because I remember in my companies, when people come back from training, the typical remark line manager will make, आप पिकनिक से आ गए, अब काम पर लग जाओ. So here that remark will never come because he's coming with a bag full of dollars. So that is the beauty that you combine business and learning together.
Okay, very good. So any final thought on people development, because you are the one who are really with so much practical experience in developing people and grooming them and doing that. So what we are talking, Toyota philosophy, any final comment before we
Yes.
go on to the next topic?
Microsoft has adopted this in US, where all leadership development program is based on action learning.
Okay.
Which means that in any leadership development program, there are three layers: the top leadership, the second rung, and the third rung. So that is the horizontal diversity. And in any training group, there will be people from, it is a compulsory that in any training program, there will be people from various disciplines. So there cannot be a training program where only HR people are there, only marketing or finance people are there. So they are all taken from various groups. So diversity is maintained, and they are talking of almost like, and the budget is almost $300 million, and that too I'm talking of a few years back. So it's well documented by Marshall Goldsmith that the kind of leadership development that Microsoft US is taking is mind-boggling. Maybe some other time I can talk about how uh, uh, action learning has helped Toyota in launching a Lexus in Japan. I don't think today the time.
Hello.
Any question?
No, I think I just got out because of the electricity outage. So
Okay,
that is some of the things which happens when you are working from home. So you can't control. So sorry that I was out for before I could get my alternate thing going. So thank you very much. I think this was a very, very useful session for all our attendees, audience today, as well as for me in person also. I think it was very enriching experience, and probably we'll learn more from you on this action learning. So thank you very much for this today.
Thank you.
And we probably, the audience may have some questions, so we may put up that question later on.
Okay. So I sign off.
Yes, if you want to, or if you want to stay on, it is up to you. But thank you very much once again.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you. Bye. Goodbye.
Okay, so I think we all are benefited by the pearls of wisdom from Mr. Akhori and his experience on action learning coaching. And now I will invite Lokesh, who is the co-founder of Kognoz, and to talk about the framework which we have developed in Kognoz for action coaching. And Lokesh requires no introduction, but I will request Lokesh to introduce himself rather than I introduce him. So Lokesh, please. Lokesh, you are there?
Yes, I'm here. Am I audible?
Yes, you are audible. Yes.
Okay. So thanks, Manish. And I think it will be difficult to fill in the shoes of Mr. Akhori. He has been behind the development of so many HR professionals, including me. He used to teach us in my college, and we really learned a lot in his guidance. So it will be very difficult to speak from the same pedestal, but whatever little knowledge we have developed, I'll be very happy to share. Naturally, as Manish introduced, I am part of the Kognoz family, and we have been working together to create methodologies, create science and science-based solutions to the application of the industry. And so far, we have done fairly well in developing some of the great methodologies in the space of coaching, in the space of leadership development, in the space of organization design, and also in the space of new age talent and learning applications like career marketplaces and learning marketplaces, etc. Personally, I enjoy working in the area of team science and complex adaptive systems. That is what I will try to introduce today as a session. Okay, so let's move on. Yeah. So I think before we move on to the subject of action coaching, it is important to understand how work happens in a physical setup and how people actually collaborate in a workplace. Uh, and what does optimal work actually constitute? And I have drawn this particular intellectual property from Gillian Stamp, who was our partner once when we used to work in the Aisha Consulting Hill. And she developed this methodology about 3 decades back in context of teams. And then research was about what does the team working scenario constitute, and what is it that optimal working relationships kind of form in the form of manager and the team relationships as well as team to team relationships, and giving different skills to the group for completion tasks or completion of work. How does a manager balance working relationships? Because we are looking at action coaching and we are looking at manager as a coach or leader as a coach, it is important to understand how the work itself happens. So there are 3 dimensions. Naturally, what happens in a workplace scenario, and all of us would be able to relate with that, is one is tasking. That what is delegated to an individual from a work perspective. What is the work that is being done by the individual? The second aspect is that of entrusting accountability. So when you task something to somebody and you would have observed that in your teams and accountability, you will have to entrust a mechanism that the person is able to work on the delegated tasks or delegated activities. And third thing is, of course, from a manager's or a leader's perspective, is the aspect of tending. Like a gardener tends the leaves and tends the flowers in his garden or her garden. Similarly, it is very important to understand the role of the manager as a developer, tending the or scripting the development of the individuals who the manager is working with. And these three, in a way, form the optimal tripod or the optimal working relationships. Now, imagine if one of these is missing. On a slide previous, if one of those is missing, if one of those is missing, it becomes disbalanced. If you do overtasking and no trusting and tending, that is a failed relationship. If you only trust and don't task and tend, that's also a failed relationship. And similarly, if you keep tending and never actually expose people to work and trust them independently to do something, like the way it happens with children as well, they will never develop. Now there are 3 important components, which is to the slide next, which is essentially the conditions of optimal working. Now, between tasking and and trusting, how much I trust and how much I do not. I need to have vigilant trust in that sense. And this vigilant trust is about my judgment as a manager or a leader. My judgment as a manager or leader is very important in what I entrust, what tasks I delegate, what tasks I don't delegate. And that judgment forms a very important condition for optimal working relationship. If I over trust and give a lot of delegation to people without they having the skill, that's a failed relationship. And if I, despite having all the competency and capability, I don't task, then also it's a failed relationship. In between tasking and tending is the aspect of review. And this is the element of coaching which we should, from an action coaching perspective. When to review? Naturally, if somebody is very competent and very independent, your review cycle will depend on that kind of a model where the person is committed and competent. If somebody is the learning stage, you will review more often. And setting up these cycles of review will be different with respect to different people. And that is where action coaching comes into picture. Again, your judgment as a manager or leader sets the tone for tasking and tending in tandem to each other. There's an interesting relationship between trusting and tending as well. Now, uh, in a working environment, there is not one person who is working. There are multiple people who are bringing their expertise to convert some raw ideas into tasks and tasks into outcomes. And they all have to coherently do it. And they all have to also trust each other. It's not just the manager and the leader. And this is where group coaching plays an important role. And a group taking together by the manager or leader plays an important role. So the coherence of the goals comes into picture as to how the manager or leader is actually balancing the act of harmonizing the goals and harmonizing the activities of people working in a team. And this is very, very important again from the point of view of group coaching. So judgment, review, and coherence forms three conditions for optimal working relationships, which are achieved by tasking, tending, and trusting. So this is about the background of what work, how work happens, and what happens in a real workplace. And we need to really look at a micro setup when we kind of get into an action coaching head or a group coaching head. As we move forward, we will see. So a
As you
manager and
mentioned,
leaders.
Lokesh, this is the basis for developing the action coaching model, right?
Correct. Absolutely. So moving forward, introducing you to the so I think this is again from Toyota and how their philosophy of learning and teaching. If the learner hasn't learned, then the teacher hasn't really taught. So moving from that philosophy, we actually let's look at a brief, briefly into the lean teacher model or the action coach model. Now, before a person or a manager or a leader becomes an action coach, it is very important to understand the work itself. Without doing the work, Manish was saying this and Mr. Kuri was saying this previously. As a coach, we actually don't need to get into work. But unless we understand the work and the context, it is impossible to coach. What the person's mindset is and what context the person is living, it is very difficult for a person to coach. So from a point of view of empathy, you have to get into the shoes of the individual you're coaching. I think a good example that many of us take in our training sessions comes from this movie Dangal, if you have seen that, and how Amir Khan actually coaches her daughter, looking at all her inconsistencies and all her issues that she's facing when she goes into the academy. So you actually understand the pitfalls, you understand the context of the work. You never tell a person what to do, but you understand what a person is doing. And that is what is about knowing work. And if you see, these three aspects of judgment, review, and coherence have to be understood before you get into a coach's shoes. So apart from work, what you need to know, what will work in the context of the individual? All individuals are different. So a lean teacher, a sensei, has a basket of tools, a basket of methodologies, which may be coming out of different schools of thought, and would know the technique, which technique has to be applied where of coaching. The fundamental techniques still remain the same of probing and facilitating, but within the basket of problem solving, what a coach should orient the coachee to, and knowing the technique, therefore, is very, very critical. And the whole art of systematic thinking that we have been learning in the last 3 webinars with Manish have to be applied very carefully. And where to apply creativity? Systematic thinking and all the techniques may not be sufficient. Sometimes you may need to create a new technique to teach to an individual, and that's where the coaches creativity comes into picture. And these are some of the practical aspects. In a lot of counseling related methodologies, and it follows a very, very coach driven path, in the sense that you're more of a counselor, but in real action time coaching on the floor with the team members, a manager and leader has to apply different methods and techniques. Third thing, which is very important for the coach, this is even before the coaching starts, he needs to understand facilitation. He needs to understand how probing prods people to observe. He or she should understand uh, what are the different aspects of listening. And I think I don't need to talk about it because Mr. Khuri talked about it in detail. How do I get the individual into a singular thought flow? I think this is the one most critical thing. If you ask me from a coaching point of view, how do I get the person to get to a singular thought process and a thought flow so that the person transitions from observation to reflection? And that is one of the most important things. And designing simple steps, help the individual design simple steps so that the person can actually take a doable action. So these are all mechanics. This is the work of the coach even before the coaching has started. And then before you actually land into the first session with any individual, you should have some of this knowledge about the individual and about the context of the work that the individual is living. Okay.
So this is beautiful though. So what you have talked about is what a coach should be. So what are the preparation and qualities are required to be a good coach? So now, are there any steps? So let's cover the steps, how coach actually translates into the teaching. So let's talk about that.
Yes, I think so. Yeah. So now, as the coach takes uh, his or her actions and job or work, towards completion from the point of view of helping the individual, and I think Mr. Akuri talked enough about how a coach should come across and how the coach should work. The first task of a coach is to teach observation. If you provide all the answers, if you provide all the solutions, nobody is learning. And then the same thing would apply if the learner hasn't learned, the teacher actually has not taught. The only thing a teacher can teach is observation. He cannot teach methodologies, or he or she cannot teach anything in this world unless the individual learns observing. And Albert Bandura, he's done a lot of research on social learning and how learning happens. And all of us would observe that all of us have learned this language that we speak without actually anybody teaching us. And that is the power of observation. As a child and as a newborn, we get the observation and model whatever tells us and the ecosystem shows us. So observation and modeling is the biggest and the best learning. And as of now, there is enough research happening on, and this is happening over the last 3 decades or so. So what I can teach others is to observe. And what do you observe? What does a person observe? Which incidentally, we were in a conversation of digital overdose in today morning with the few colleagues and some of the partners. What do you teach? Digitally, there's so many devices, there's so many things which are there, to kind of take away your attention. And in that, when the motor skills take over, you actually forget to see your own work from the open eyes. And you teach a person to observe the work that the person is doing, the surroundings, the ecosystem, what waste somebody is generating. And the waste is there. So what is constituting that waste? And observe without judgment. We always end up saying, oh, this has always been this way. But, some of you in the Toyota-led factories or Toyota practices would have seen the Ono circle. And Mr. Ono, he himself used to stand on a circle in the factory and see the whole factory every morning, evening, to see what is not going well. So you observe without judgment, without pointing fingers. You don't actually try to see from a judgmental point of view, and collect and create data to improve. So you teach people to observe, and teaching observation, the most critical yet the most difficult task, because people come with different colors and different shades and different judgments. The second thing, and this would typically take a manager or a leader, when you're working with your team, at least a month, 2 months, to actually understand which lens is on the eyes of the individual and how to actually move forward with the individual. So how to teach the person to observe. And this is where singular thought flow, which we talked in facilitation, comes into help. The second thing is, once the observation is there and when objective observation is there, data is there, the second thing that you teach the individual is to reflect. How does the individual reflect? How to form the singular thought chain to reach the conclusion on each reflection. Creating options. What all can solve the issues on the ground from a work perspective, from a non-work perspective, and whatever is the subject of coaching. Helping the individual develop knowledge of the work and the job at hand. So you don't teach it, you help the person learn. And this is the most important element of coaching, that you don't actually teach, you actually help the person learn. And of course, from a group perspective, when Manish talks about it, reflect collectively as teams, of course. And then finally, teaching to act. What actions in a simple manner, in a rapid experimentation form, a person can take uh, in order to achieve the objectives of the improvement, whether it's personal improvement or it is about work related improvement. And doing that in rapid format. A lot of people these days talk about agile and, from the context of, uh, uh, Scrum Masters and agile working and squads that are running the show and all of that. All of them are nothing but this aspect of acting in a very speedy manner with through rapid experimentation. So this is the overall framework that we developed in Kognoz to carry out the action coaching, which is a very simple 6-step framework. The first 3 is about the action coach himself or herself becoming worthy of coaching. So, becoming a teacher or a sensei is the most difficult task. So first 3 is all about your ability to become a teacher. And the next 3 is of what you do with your coaching to help the individual learn and act. So that's about the framework. And I think
And
to
I
sum
think
it up,
you can relate this very well with the A3 thinking framework, which we talked day before yesterday, and the Kolb's experiential learning cycle. So these are this framework actually gels very well with that. So this is in summary. So you can just talk about this.
Absolutely.
Role.
And now, I think summing up from where Mr. Akuri also was talking about. So what is the job of a coach or a sensei or a lean teacher? Is about accelerating the learning DNA, not the teaching DNA. You teach to observe, reflect, and act, but you don't teach learning. Learning itself is the individual's job. And as a lean teacher, our job is to challenge the thought, probe, help question reality again and again. Reality as construed by different people is different. So when you question the reality itself, that's when the solutions emerge. That's when new ideas emerge. A lot of times we have seen people in factory shop floors or on banking branches or so on and so forth. The way of life, people say that this is exactly how it is. But then when you question reality, new ideas come, and those new ideas become new solutions of the future. So probing and helping question the reality. This is the first task. So challenging the thought, facilitating realization, making the realization happen. Develop self-knowledge that there's something which can be improved. There's something which can be done to make things better. And leading from the back. This is the most interesting part. A coach's job is to only bring questions and outside ideas. What can be done and what is done is actually the job of the individual who is going to coaching. Bringing the technique, exposing to technique, and developing faith and providing support in the journey of coaching. So that's the whole methodology in a crux. And I think I hope I have not overshot the time allocated to me. But in a few slides, this is how. Yeah. So this is how I would sum it up, from an action coaching perspective. Manish, over to you.
Thank you, Lokesh. And I think this was a very good insight. And just want to emphasize here once again the connection of what the action coaching framework, which Lokesh just presented, and how it gels with the framework of A3 thinking, which we talked day before yesterday. So you will see that very beautifully the 7 thinking principles of A3, which I talked about day before yesterday, we have really incorporated beautifully into what is the qualities of a coach, what is the work or what they need to teach, and what are really the role of the sensei or the coach. So we have put this framework very nicely. And Now, how to make it act, further, what we have done is we have developed two methodologies. One is how do we use this coaching framework every day? So we talk about driving or managing the daily improvements program, in which how leaders interact with people in the workplace every day and find those coaching moments and translate all this thing as a learning moment for the employee and help the employee to really learn, reflect, and grow. And the second framework which we have is in a more structured problem-solving environment. So again, A3 based, we have got something called rapid improvement events. So in the rapid improvement events, all the things where here we were talking about how to teach to act. So what rapid experimentation needs to be done. Again, the Kolb's experiential learning cycle, you can see that you do the active experimentation, then you reflect on that. So that is how the total framework works. So let me move on and let me just talk about some more practical methods on coaching. So how do you teach to observe at the Gemba? Gemba, some of the initiators, it is the Japanese name for the workplace where the work actually happens. Initially, the Gemba was the factory shop floor, but later on we realized that calling a factory shop floor Gemba is really limiting our thinking process. Gemba basically is wherever the work is happening. Suppose you are dealing with the purchasing organization, for them the Gemba is their office and the suppliers area. For the sales guy, the Gemba is again their office and the customer end. So Gemba is basically the workplace. So how to teach to observe? We have got a framework where we say that's a 4-step. The number one is one should know, and again, going back to the action coaching framework, know your purpose. What is the learning objective today? What is the thing which you want the coachee to learn today? So what are the problems you want people to solve today? What is the purpose? What are the issues at hand? What is the objective of that learning? You cannot observe without having an objective in your mind. So first and foremost is you must define what is the purpose of today's coaching, what you want to really get the learning through. Once you are clear about that, then you decide second that which Gemba is more appropriate for driving the learning there. So whether it is the shop floor, whether it is the office, whether it is a supplier end, whether it is a customer end, wherever it is, understand that to meet your purpose, which is the Gemba, which is the workplace, you have to do that. Now comes the observation. Observe the framework. And this is where the thing which we talk about, know the work. When you know the work, that defines the framework. So you must know, and coachee should be able, you have to ask a very simple question. How the work is happening? Do you know the framework? Suppose you are dealing with a sales process where the customer complaints have come. So you will simply ask the salesperson that what is the standard you have for the sales process, and let me observe on that. So let us observe on that. And once you have made the observation that are we having the standard, are we following the standard, what is normal, what is abnormal, what are the waste, what are the unevenness, where is the stress level, what are the overburdens. So you'll be observing these variety of things. And then finally, the fourth step is whatever you have observed, you need to validate. So this is the 4-step process which we use for doing the correct observation in the Gemba. Framework for observation is you want the coachee to start correlating between these 3 P's, the purpose, people, and the process. So the coachee or the learner should start relating the observation with the purpose, that whatever is being done, whatever is happening in the workplace, how that is solving the customer's problem. Because that is the purpose of the workplace, right? Solving the customer problems. So relate that with the people, that how people are trying to get together, how are they creating that value, what are the processes they are following or improving, so what people action is there. So you make observation on that and correlate with that, that the people action, is it in line with the purpose? And then finally, you correlate with the process, that how the work is actually happening. So you make an observation on these 3 aspects. purpose, people, and process. And then you validate that, and then you reflect on that, and then you come out with the new learning, and which will go into improving either the process or the people capability to do better. So that is how this will be there in the workplace. This framework which we use is part of our daily improvement process or daily management process. We call it managing daily improvements. So this is the practical aspect which a leader has to go to the Gemba and tell the people, tell the employee who are working for him or her to come and follow. Lokesh mentioned something very interesting called Kognoz circle. Ono, for some of the beginners, is the name of a gentleman who's considered the creator of Toyota production system, Taichi Ono. He had developed a very unique way of teaching people how to observe. Any new inductee, he will take him to the or her to the shop floor, draw a circle, and ask the person to stand in that circle, and then entire shift from that circle, the person has to just observe how the things are happening. What is the work? What are people doing? Are they really doing something value adding or not adding? So make all that observation standing in that circle. And that circle was drawn very strategically from where the entire process could be visible. Some of the factories call the Ono circle also as POV, point of view. So they also make the point of view in the flow. So that was the method of teaching the observation, because that is something which is very, very important, the starting point of coaching. If the coachee is not able to observe, so we heard two things. One is from Mr. Akhari, their importance of listening. And now we are talking about importance of observation. You have to listen, you have to observe. Both these things are equally important. I will not say that one is more than other. Both are equally important. We must learn how to listen and how to observe, rather than simply hearing and seeing. That is the phrase which I often use in my trainings. We are not here to just hear and see, but to listen and to observe. That is the framework which we use. And this was the framework I was talking. I had touched upon day before yesterday also. So the questions which the leaders have to get trained and they have to ask the coachee for validation is, this is the algorithm. The problems are there. The first question they must ask is, what is the standard? What is the standard to prevent this problem? Have you really worked on the standard? And the answer is no. Next question is, do you know how to develop it? Let us get a time in the diary action plan and let's get going with this. Creation of standard is one of the 14 principles of Toyota way also. This is something which is always a starting point. If you don't work with the standardization, if you're not obsessed with standardization, we will be only recycling problem and we will not be learning. So very important, if you want the learning to get institutionalized, you want to form a learning culture, you have to start with the standards. Second question is, if the standard is there, did we follow the standard? Answer is no, then get into the coaching, get into the training, get into the motivation aspect, ensure that people have started following the standards. If the answer to the second question is also yes, then you say that is the standard correct? If the answer is no, then you should know how will you improve the standard and get it improved. If the answer is yes, then you do the cause and effect, root cause relationship, understanding and take action there. This is one framework which really helps in the workplace to solve problems very fast and really not to recycle the problems all the time. My experience, and I'm sure all of you or most of you will actually agree with me, that we do a lot of hard work, but most of that is firefighting in the workplace. And one of the major reasons for that firefighting is we really ignore creation of standard or following the standard. So this is something which is very, very important part, and I put a lot of emphasis in during the coaching is working with the standard is the first tip of first coaching point. First thing which all the employees needs to get into their mind. And that is why company like Toyota has put it in one of the principles, 14 principles, standardization. Okay. This is the way the coaching of team mentor-mentee principle is there. So each level of leadership acts as a mentor to the next level. So I think this is what we have heard from Mr. Akhori also, that this is how the Microsoft has got their organization level 1, level 2, level 3. So the leaders are supposed to be the action learning coach. And this is the same framework which we also use, that each leadership layer has to act as a mentor-mentee or coach-coachee relationship to the next level. So there is an interaction between the leader and the employee. The leader must empower the employee. Leaders are well prepared for the discussions, and leaders focus on the recognition and elimination of the problem. The attitude and behavior of the leader sets an example for the employee. So leader has to be really a kind of a role model all the time. And so it requires a lot of preparation on part of the leader to really interact with the employee for the coaching moment. You simply cannot coach an employee without having a credibility yourself, because they won't listen to you. So you have to be a role model. Then you have got a chance to really get the employee to listen to you. Okay. On the same part, the coachee or the employee also has a responsibility, because if it is a two-way traffic, yes, we do agree that if the coachee has not learned or the learner has not learned, the teacher has not taught. So that's why the first thing is leader has to prepare, but then the learner also needs to be motivated. The motivation comes from the empowerment action or the engagement action of the leader. And the employee on their part, once we assume that they are motivated to learn and improve, then they need to use the leaders as a role model. They have to really look forward for their supervisor or the leader as a role model, so that they are willing to learn from them. They get actively involved in go and see and the continuous improvement programs and the problem solving. They get engaged into that. They use the A3 style rapid improvements. Those are the problem solving. They do the Kaizens. Then employees are well prepared for the discussion with the leaders. And finally, the experienced employees take over the individual task. So that is how the cycle of mentor-mentee actually happens in the company. This is all embodied into what we call a managing daily improvement program for us. Final thought, what I'm not covering here is, I have covered the managing daily improvement program, in which we have a daily instances of coaching moments where the leader interacts and do it. What I have not covered here is the rapid improvement process, but that would have taken a much longer time. But just to give you an idea, rapid improvement process is doing a process improvement rapidly. So that follows the A3 thinking format. Some of the examples I had mentioned day before yesterday also on that. But that is a framework which is kind of a team-based coaching, and 3 to 5 days duration, in which the action coaching happens to the entire team. So that I'm not covering in my today's webinar. Final thought on the coaching is, leaders' disciplined adherence to the process makes management easy, management work or not work. That is very important. Disciplined adherence to the process. Leaders at all levels must be most disciplined, from the leader to general manager, everybody. We have to lead by example. That is what makes the work happen. Make standard work completion visual. I will just end the session by one of the quotes which I'm very fond of using. Find something not happening as per the standard, something happening abnormal. What will happen to the culture of the organization if you do zero intervention? You don't even bother to ask why, what is wrong, why it is wrong. You simply go by, you see something unusual, and you just continue walking and do nothing about it. Now, these kind of leadership behavior sets the wrong tone. You are giving a permission to continue with the abnormal things and destroy the standards. So leadership is every moment when you find something not adherence to the standard work, you have to intervene, make it a coaching point, understand the issue, get it resolved, get people adhere to the standard. So that is something which is leadership, and that is there are much more to developing people. I'm sure all of you pick will never end actually when we keep talking about that. But for today, I think this is all I wanted to talk about. So once again, thank you for your patience, and thank you for Mr. Akhori and Lokesh for their pearl of wisdom in today's webinar. So let us take the questions from the audience. So the question here is the first one, which I'm saying, okay, there are a lot of questions are there today, which is good. So what is the right stage for a company to form such principles? Stage could be defined as number of people or number of years of existence or maybe something else. At what stage did Toyota form these roles and what triggered Toyota to form these? Wow, that's a very good question. Now, I will talk this with a story. First of all, there is nothing called a right moment. Whenever you want to start, you can always start and transform. I was lucky to be part of a greenfield project in a company called Duracell. We were setting up a factory near Manesar. Right at the time when the factory was building brick by brick, we were talking of building the desired culture in the organization brick by brick. So that is how the management team was spending their time. We were doing a visioning, what type of people, what type of culture we want to have, and all of us were aligned. And we had to align because, understand, it was a new greenfield project. So even the management team had come from different cultural background, different work practices. So first of all, building up of the leadership team on the common consensus. And then when we started hiring employees, we really got the right people on board. We did the right training for them. I think I'm very proud of that fact that we were probably one of the first one to establish what we call self-managed teams on the shop floor. This was way back in year 2000, 2001, around that time. So it's almost 20 years now. So we really established workmen managing the shop floor entirely, from planning to execution to reporting, everything. And the role of the supervisor was more like a teacher or a coach or a facilitator. So I've got an instance where we have done right from the beginning of the company, and in my transformation journey with a variety of my clients also, whenever we have started, it becomes equally difficult or easy depending on how you approach it. I give you example of NUMI, the New United Motors in USA. So the Toyota coaches, the most difficult plant, and that was a brownfield, and they were able to transform it within a year, building the trust with the employees, showing the mutual respect to the employees. So I don't know whether I've answered this question. So there's nothing called right stage. You can do it at any stage. And I have given you example of both. Okay. Some of the principles require a lot of investment in terms of time or money, and therefore it depends on whether the company can afford it. Wow. This is something which is, yes, a very valid question, I will say. This is something which is a worry, but again, the Toyota was very clear on that. If they are committed to the long-term philosophy, they have never taken a short-term action. And I gave you example of not laying off people with the drop of head. So right now, if the COVID-19 thing is going, we are hearing the companies are not paying the salaries to the people. They are doing the retrenchment. They are doing the layoffs. Now that is not the right thing. They are compromising their long-term objective of the company. And one of the things which is a food for thought, and that is how the Toyota had also asked that question, or the question was asked to them, was failure to grow the company is a failure of the management. But who suffers? The lower level employees suffer because of the failure of the management. Is it fair? And that is something which we all must really question ourselves with a lot of responsibility. So I'll just say this much on this topic. Unless Lokesh, you want to add anything on this question, very close to me. So this is the way I have answered. Please feel free to join me in answering the question.
Yeah, sure. No problem. Yeah.
Next question is, should people development come at the cost of company expansion. Wow. So that means in the mind, you have a conflict. The company expansion can happen without people. Now that is, I think, when I ask this question, I think you must be getting your answers. That actually people development is a means to expand the company, not the other way around. They are not at loggerheads, but they are complementary to each other. One cannot happen without the other. That's a belief. Okay. The next question, a lot of questions today, which is good. So what worked for Toyota must not work for other companies. Some of the principles definitely will apply to many industry, but what it will come down to is what principles will help a company like Amazon principles are different from that of Toyota. Okay. So my take on this is that principles don't change. What changes? Its application. How you are converting the principles into your techniques, into your work practices. That is what makes a difference. If you, I have studied a lot on Amazon also. I've studied all the good companies who are their best practices. I think at a principle level, they all will be very much aligned. Because principles are something which are very much aligned to the true values, the true north values. So they will not change. So I will disagree with that, what you are saying here is, reflect on that. What will change is the application, the techniques. So the Toyota way, we have to understand the principles behind that. And that is something which I, as a coach or as a consultant or as a leader in the industry earlier, my passion was always to make people understand the principles. If you understand the principles, things becomes much more simple for people. What happens is, without understanding the principle, we simply take a toolbox and we start practicing it, and then we say it is not working. In my previous webinars on application of lean in service, healthcare, and project management also, I emphasize this thing. If we understand the principles, we can apply in every situation. If we don't understand the principle and we are bogged down by the tools and techniques, yes, we will fail. And then we will say that what is working for Toyota is not working elsewhere. That is not the case. It will work everywhere if you understand the principles and apply it well. And that's the role of a coach. You require a coach for that. Okay. If you're not satisfied, you can always post a supplementary question, which I will cover as I'm going in the sequence. Okay. So this is a question. Any recommended book on action learning? I don't know. Probably I will ask Mr. Akhori, and I will get back to you on the what are the books on the action learning framework. So I also need to learn it from them.
Yeah,
from him.
I have some material. This is by Atishay. We will send it to you. In fact, I did a project in Gillette. Duracell self-managed teams were working very well, and we were to replicate it in Gillette as well. So Gillette and Duracell was part of the same group at that time. So I have a lot of material. I will share that with you, Atishay.
The benefit of larger audience, maybe we can put it onto our website somewhere, recommended reading materials kind of a thing, probably.
Yes, certainly.
Yeah. Okay. Action learning versus Delphi technique, which gives better decisions. So Lokesh, probably you are the one who have to answer this.
Okay. So I will have to get educated on the Delphi technique, to be very honest. I can't outright compare and tell you the answer, but let me get educated and come back on that.
Okay. What I can say is that, as I was talking about the principles will be same as we were examining, as Lokesh was presenting. The principles which we have come out, it complies with the principles which we talk about, the A3 thinking. It complies with the principles which Kolb's experiential learning was there, or Mr. Akhori, what he shared about the action learning coaching principles. I think they all get aligned at a principle level. So it will not be very different. That much I can say with a lot of confidence here. Please elaborate singular thought process. Wow, singular thought process.
Okay, so let me take this one. So singular thought chain. So our mind is. So this is a little bit of psychology in the background. Uh, our mind is not stable, unfortunately. It comes up with almost at a very fast pace. The thoughts and the thought chains, they change very fast, and you would see that your moods, your emotions, and your affect, as it is called in psychology, changes very very fast, and it influences every aspect of your doing. So our mood swings, we have heard this word, mood swings or dark sides, influences our cognition. So singular thought chain is when you have put your observation, Arjun ki aankh, Arjun machli ki aankh, the eye of the fish, which you have to focus on, and keep that one focus to solve that problem one at a time. See, it problems can be solved only one at a time. So it is very important to keep your thought process on a singular thought chain, move on from it, think enough about it, resolve the problem, and move on to the next one.
And this is
If
also
we
going
what
back
happens
to,
is the yeah
yeah,
yeah
go ahead, sorry.
no problem. Yeah. So
So what I was saying
divergent
was that,
thinking takes over.
yes. So, what I was saying, Lokesh, was that there are studies, scientific studies, which also says that brain cannot do the multitasking. And I think this also rhymes with that, that singular thought is
Absolutely.
what you have to take one at a time. Because
Yes.
brain will not do
Absolutely.
the multitasking. You can take it with a very simple example. When you are concentrating on, writing a note, and suddenly your phone rings and you are talking on the phone and mechanically you are still writing. When you get off the phone, you have to actually reread that what you have written, because your brain was not working. It was more like a motor skill which was going on and you were writing something in
Yeah.
subconscious. So brain will not do the multitasking. So it is always better to have a singular thought process is going. And it's not very easy. It requires a lot of meditation and concentration.
Correct. I think, and also uh, s- in this digitally overloaded world, it's even more difficult.
Yeah. In fact, in our project management, we use a word called bad multitasking. And that bad multitasking is not more with physical, but more with mental bad multitasking. Okay, let me take the next question. Do you have a specified format or process for review in the optimal relationship model? So this is again the
Yes.
tripod thing.
Yes,
So
there is a methodology which is called working relationships appreciation. How to understand a team's effectiveness. To understand team's effectiveness, you have tools and methodologies to see whether which side the tripod is disbalanced or misbalanced. So, where is the tasking happen optimally, is standing happening optimally, or trusting is happening optimally or not. So there are tools and techniques available to do that.
okay, now this is a question. Can you give real life example of slide 22? So I have to go back and check which is slide 22. Hmm. Framework for observation. So you want to go and teach a person on how to make the workplace safe. So let me take an example of that. So you go on a round and then you make the person observe and relate the observation with these three things. What was the purpose of that workplace? How that was serving the purpose of the customer. Customer problem here the customer was the employees, and how the employees are remaining safe in that. So that is the purpose. What are the people's action? So how are they engaging? Like, are they seeing the unsafe place, unsafe practices and doing nothing about it? Or they are ignorant about it? Or is it something which is to do with their processes? So critical observation on the people's behavior. And then finally looking into the hard processes, that what are the things in the processes which needs to be put in place so that workplace becomes more safe. So you will be actually correlating the three to make a picture, and probably you will come out with the picture that finally the validation will come, that it is more about the unawareness of the people on the safety, they are not aware of that a small mistake can be how detrimental for the life of the person. So you make a framework and then you can do the coaching on that. That means the reflection will come and then the action will come through that. That is how it will happen. Okay. Let me take the next question. Any example of using action learning for breaking silos and enhancing collaboration for leadership team? Okay. This is something which is, I think Mr. Rakhori was mentioning that at a layers of team, which say in the action learning format, you have got about 5 to 8 people, and you always form a divergent group. Actually, that is what I learned from him. And why require diversity is also very important, because that is useful for breaking the group think. So you require a diverse work group to work on that. So that becomes a diverse leadership team, and they will work on the action learning. So I think I will have to get some examples from him, because that is not my core subject, but this is what I have understood. And probably we will get back some examples from him and post on our blogs. Okay, next question is, okay, so this is additional question from you, that in fact an example of slide 22 done right and an example of slide 22 done wrong would be great. Okay. So on the same example, let us understand how that can go wrong. It will go wrong is that you observation on people's behavior, you must simply say that those people are non-compliant and use a stick and carrot approach to get the work done on the safety, and which will not happen, because safety is more behavioral related. So when you correlate the purpose, people and process wrongly, you can go into that wrong direction by approaching the problem of people safety with a stick and carrot approach rather than the understanding and correcting the behavior on that. So probably that is how I will say the same example. Slide 25 is fantastic. Well put. Thank you. I think that's about the leaders. Very, very important, passionate thing. It's all about leadership. End of the day, our framework, leaders are the coach and the key people developer. In fact, the companies where I have worked, we have always said that the line manager is the HR manager for the employees. We always said that the core HR people role is more enabling role for the leader, and the leaders are the one who are the direct HR manager for the employees. So that is the philosophy I have worked in my career as an executive, and I have inculcated that. And whenever I do the consulting, I follow the same approach. Need more practical insights on learning DNA. Learning DNA. This is, I think you are referring to that slide on the DNA. Is that correct? I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, this is the one. Okay. So
yeah, so this is the entire. There are two aspects which one needs to understand in this. One is the aspect of facilitation. So there's a lot of education one would have to do on the principles of facilitation, and most of which are dependent on probing and helping. Requirement is there without coming to a judgment, without providing a solution. Suspending the judgment, it is called technically. So suspending your own judgment for a significant amount of time, so that you can probe more, you can ask more, you can help the person question reality more and more. So one aspect is that, and second aspect is of through the method of questioning, through the method of probing, you help the person realize and go and because solutions come from the reality, understands in a new way. You know, all would have heard of unlearning as the necessary step of learning. So the coach is facilitating the unlearning process, and that is where realization becomes important. And the third aspect is of you know, what can you bring to the table as a coach? We can only bring and if you go look at the mentor himself, what did he teach his mentee actually? The techniques, right? So you provide more and more techniques to the individual, but you leave the individual to apply those techniques. In the and in the aspect of counseling and coaching, there are lots and lots of good material which is available on counseling. So I think as a further read, I would advise that some of that is used. We will also publish some of them that we know of.
I
For
will just add two more things on the learning DNA. The one is the learning responsibility is more on the learner and equally on the person who is teaching, but more on the learner, I will still put it. And the learning DNA is about how do we develop more responsibility in the employees for their own learning. So that is how these three steps actually help. So you are doing that constantly. And leading from the back is very important, because here the coach or the person who is imparting the learning is not providing the answer, is teaching the techniques, yes, it is not providing the answer. They are leading from the back by asking good questions and allowing the learner to reflect and come out with the solutions continuously. That is very important in the coaching aspect. And the second thing which I wanted to tell here is challenging the thoughts, because the belief is that end of the day, everything wrong which is happening, the root cause for that is somewhere in our thinking process, the way we have created the process, the way we have created the policies. That is because of our current thought process. So unless we challenge our current paradigms, current thoughts, we will not get a breakthrough. So that is how this learning DNA has been thought through and designed. So I think, as Lokesh was saying, this is something we can talk more and publish more paper on that. And this is something a very simple, not a question, but a note. Thanks, Lokesh. So very nice. And that was from Akshay for you, Lokesh. And finally, at what level, mid-management or in case by case for different companies, does group coaching stop to get effective? This is a question from Reena. I think this will remain effective if it becomes a DNA of the company, is what I will say. And my own practical experience is there. So I have led the companies where I have seen this thing live, and it has not really stopped at any level. So we have seen right from the top management to the shop floor to the last person facing the customer, everybody engaged into the learning thing. So it is, I will say that it does not really stop at any place. Group coaching is applicable everywhere, every level. Even at the top leadership level also, the group coaching happens, as well as the bottommost level. So that is how I will put it. So that was the last question.
Sir, sorry to interrupt.
Okay.
There are a couple of questions on the chat. So one is, on what parameters should reviews be monitored?
Let me open the chat box in that case. Okay, yeah, what is the question? What parameters should reviews be monitored? This is, I really don't
I think this is pertaining to this is pertaining to tasking and tending. So
okay.
review is always going to be based on the work. So work scenario will have its outcome parameters, and those will become the so the in process and outcome parameters which are related to the work scenario or the work content will become parameters of review, and those should be objectively monitored.
And there is one more question as well. Can slide 23 be? Yes.
this is applicable to all organization, manufacturing, or such, because every company works with certain processes, and those processes needs to have a standard. So in my experience, we have used in all kind of companies, because I have experience of working and consulting in variety of industries, manufacturing, service, healthcare, labs, everywhere. And this is applicable everywhere. So that will be my answer. Started with manufacturing and it got applicable everywhere. That is how it is. Okay. So this brings to the end this webinar. So once again, thank you for your being the audience today. And this was the last webinar of the series 1, which we have done. And I'm sure we will come out very soon with the next set of learning, because this is the time, and I believe that we will be having a more extended time at home. So we will continue to give more and more learning. Whatever we know, we will try to share, and we'll try to invite. So please reach out to us and give us a feedback. And if any one of you have got any topic in your mind, you want to learn more, or you want to be part of the teaching community along with us, both are welcome. So with that, I think I will end today's webinar. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Good day and good weekend.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.